Well, it'll be 12 years ago this Wimbledon that Roger Federer stunned seven-time champion Pete Sampras in the round of 16. And this Wimbledon will also mark the 10th-year anniversary of Roger Federer's first Grand Slam title when he defeated Mark Philippoussis in the men's final. But one of the greatest debates of all time has been who would win between Federer and Sampras if they're playing at their best. And you can debate that. You can say, this Sampras was on grass or Federer on clay or whatever. I've been thinking about it because I watched the Federer-Sampras match. I actually have that match on DVD, the one that they played at Wimbledon. And Pete had just won the Wimbledon title the year before. So he still had some game on the grass. And he played a very, very good match. Federer was still just a young puppy. He wasn't even 20 yet. He's still 19. And he took it to Sampras and beat him 7-5 in the third, 7-5 in the fifth. And the funny thing about it was Pete never really was in control that whole match. Because if you look at it, Federer still was ways away from winning his first major, and Pete had just won one not even 12 months earlier. And would go on to win another one at the US Open a year and a half later. So it just proves that he still had some game left in the tank. But the real debate has been going on between who would win if these two played each other. So I decided to go into my sports lab, decided to go into my tennis lab, and break it down. Who would win between Federer and Sampras? The venue I chose, the early 2000s grass at Wimbledon, the 02, 03, 04. Because I would choose the grass from the year 2000. It was the last year because the grass has changed a few times since Pete won it. Like, it was incredibly slick in the 90s. But the sod has been redone several times in the last decade. And I think it was prior to the 2002 year they redid it. I believe it was after the 07 year that they did it. The year in 08 was when the Dow won it, and that was no coincidence. They slowed the grass down to give the baseliners a better chance against Federer. But who honestly would win if Federer and Sampras went head-to-head on a grass court? That's a good question. So let's simply just look at how these two players won on grass. And let's start with Sampras. What made Pete so damn good on the grass was his first serve. It was a cannon. And the funny thing about it was, it wasn't like a Roddick serve or like a, Ivo Karlovic where they're just going to hit mountains of aces and they're just going to try to whack it as hard as they can. Pete would try to for 120, 125, but he would put it in the corners. He'd get his 20, 23 aces a match, but he'd get so many service winners. And the thing about it was, he throws the same toss up, hits the same spot out wider as he does in the deuce, as he does in the ad. He can't read his serve. He can't read the direction. You don't know where it's going. And then he would just come in right behind it and finish off with a volley. His ground game was not incredibly good. He had a very, very good backhand, one that could hit one or two good shots a match on crucial points. He had a forehand that, when he struck it, particularly on the run, was just lethal. When he was coming forward, his forehand, if it was high around his shoulders, it could be a liability, but if it was in a strike zone, he was coming forward, Pete was going to hit a winner. One of the best chip returners to ever play, the way he was able to get the ball so low that he would just, in the corner, he would come in and put away the volley. He did that for so many years at Wimbledon and just drove his opponents nuts. When you look at the players that he beat at Wimbledon all those years, guys like Agassi, guys like Rafter, Ivan Isevich, Henman, Becker, because he was just, it wasn't so much that he was such a good returner, he would just neutralize your serve to a degree and come in behind it. Now you look at what Federer's done. Federer's been more of, Pete's game, I think you could say, is a little more violent in terms of, how he won with, like full bang, bang shots and like that with his big serve and his net game. Federer did it with a little more elegance, when he won his Wimbledons. Because his serve has gotten so much better over the years. Like 2012 Wimbledon was probably one of some of the best his serve ever was. Because he was able to direct it. I mean, it was incredibly crucial when he beat Djokovic in that semifinal. And then Murray in the final, he served particularly well. His ability, to hit touch shots has gotten better over the years. His backhand and his forehand, I mean, you can say whatever you want about Ken Rosewall and Tommy Haas over who isn't, and all those other guys who have nice one-handed backhands. Federer's one-handed backhand is the best I've ever seen because of the things he can do with it. Like, he can hit clean winners on the dead run. Doesn't matter where you are. He's going to hit an angle that's just going to make you say, I just can't cover that. Then you look at his forehand, arguably the greatest forehand in the history of professional tennis. Whether it's on the run and he just hits a passing shot, whether he, is dealing with a short return, he just puts it away. His forehand is just absolutely lethal. As a volleyer, he's underrated. He's underrated in tennis history in terms of a volleyer because pretty much every time he's needed to volley on the grass, he's done it successfully. He's been able to come forward. Like against Murray, that was huge in the final. He won over 70% of his net points against Murray, who might have the best passing shots in the game. So you can tell it's different than Pete in a way. In a way, it's not, because you look at the 04 final against Roddick or the 09 final against Roddick. A lot of big points he won coming forward. But now let's break it down and how each shot deals with each other. Because I've talked now about how both players won. Now it's time to talk about how they match up. Let's talk about Pete's serve against Roger's return. Pete's going to hit his 20 aces. That's a given. He's going to hit a lot of aces. But his second serve is going to set up because I know the grass technically does not permit a high bounce, but you look at what Nadal and even Djokovic have been able to do on it against Federer. Their kick has been able to give Federer a little bit of trouble because they've been able to get him off the court. Pete's second serves weren't noted for having much kick. He was going to put him in a place where you couldn't get them. But the thing about it is Federer is so quick off the ball, off the baseline, and he reads the serve so well that, Pete's going to have to hit some absolutely perfect serves to come in, because if not, he's going to be in deep trouble. Because I know they've said Agassi's the greatest returner serve in the history of the game. Federer can neutralize the big serves and can hit clean winners off the weak ones. And he doesn't even have to hit it to really swing at it to hit a winner. He'll just block it up the line or cross court and use your pace against you. I mean, he's got so much reach on the return that it's almost impossible to get anything back against him. I mean, you've seen it in matches with guys like Roddick and Philippoussis have had to deal with. Roddick, I remember in 2003, was hitting like 28, 23 aces a match going into that match against Federer. He hit 4. Philippoussis was having like 30 a match. He hit 46 on Agassi. He had 14, I believe, for the match. Because you just can't ace Federer. It's just so tough to do. I mean, even in 2009, when Federer had to deal with Roddick in that final, they played like 8 sets worth of tennis, because that 5th set went so damn long that you figure Roddick would have at least 35, 40 aces. He only put out 23. His same total as the 03 Open final when he beat Ferreira. But back to how the serve matches up. If Pete can serve well, he can give Federer some trouble because, the volleying from Sampras is going to put Federer on his heels. Like, Pete's ability to come forward will put Federer on his heels. I mean, even the 01 match it did that. Pete coming forward off some good serves really gave Federer some trouble. Now let's reverse it. Federer serve against Pete's return. The difference between what Pete dealt with in the 90s and the 2000s against guys like Rafter and Krejcik and even Ivanisevic and Henman, that he's not going to have the luxury of doing against Federer, is that if Federer gets a short ball, he's going to take his time and he's going to make Sampras work. He's not going to come forward, because a lot of times on points where Sampras won returning, he would return the serve low and the volleyer would have to hit up, and then he could just hit a passing shot or really put the volleyer under pressure. That's not going to happen against Federer, because Pete's going to have to hit a damn good return literally every time, because while Federer's not going to be hitting it as big as Sampras or, putting as much action on the second, he's going to be kicking it more. If anything drops short, Federer's forehand will put it away. It's like His laser-like forehand will just absolutely bury it. The way Federer's the last 10 years on grass has been able to get up to that return of serve and put it away with a forehand or even a backhand. You know? And even if Sampras does chip and come in to Federer's backhand, I've seen Henman chip and come in. I've seen, other players chip and come in against Federer and hit good returns. And Federer just blocks him right back like it's nothing and hits winners. Federer's the master of the two-shot pass. One shot to get you on your heels, and another one and to open up the court, and another one will be the clean winner. So, will Sampras hit his spots? Yes. Will he get his aces? Yes. But he's going to have to hit at least 30 aces to really, really have a good chance of beating Federer. Federer, on the other hand, he's going to hit maybe 20 aces. He's not going to hit a whole lot. But then again, he's going to place his serve. And he's going to jam Sampras sometimes. And anything short, any return that Sampras hits, Federer's pouncing on it with his forehand. All right, now let's look at how they contrast when Pete's forward and Federer's at the net. Pete's forward and Federer's at the baseline. Pete was probably one of the 3 greatest volleyers of all time. You look at Edberg, you look at Stan Smith, the way they volleyed, and Pete's up there with them because what he did at Wimbledon for 7 years. But the thing about it is this. If Pete's not coming in behind his serve, Federer will eat him alive. Because he ate up serving volleyers on grass early in his career. Because his ability to just, find these angles on these passing shots, and even if Sampras does track maybe one of them down, Federer will be there to hit the other one for a winner. So unless Sampras comes in on his serve, it's not going to be as great an advantage. But if Federer comes in, it's going to be behind a good shot that puts Sampras on his heels, and unless Federer really kind of bluffs the volley, Sampras is going to have a lot of trouble dealing with, the shot that Federer gets to him. I like to think of it like this. You're basically pitting one of the greatest volleyers of all time against this guy who's been able to create magic with his passing shots. I mean, go back and watch the Wimbledon finals against Roddick and the Australian Open semi from 07. And there were points where Roddick had Federer beat when he was at the net. And Federer just would come up with this ridiculous passing shot that you would just go, how does he do that? I mean, he hits it with such pace and such accuracy. Now let's flip it up. If they're both at the baseline, I mean, yes, Pete Sampras has a good forehand, and yes, he's got a good backhand. But if they're both at the baseline, he will not win points at all. Federer's ground game is so rock solid. I mean, look how he's had to adjust over the years. Like early on in his career, he didn't need a rock solid ground game. He just needed to hit 1 or 2 shots, get an edge and a point, and then the third one would be see ya. Points over. But with the emergence of the consistent baseliners like Nadal, Djokovic, and Murray, and even Federer to an extent, Joe-Wilfried Tsonga, he's had to become better from the back of the court to have to be more consistent, And Federer, to his credit, has done that. Like, over the years, he's gotten better from the baseline, consistency-wise, dealing with what his opponents can throw at. Now, Sampras had a good baseline game, but his baseline game was built around one thing: get to the net. And he would come in on some cruddy approaches, but at the time, there weren't too many great baseliners out there, so he wouldn't have to do a whole lot for his volleys. Yes, he had some damn good volleys, and he could hit some incredible touch-drop volleys. But Federer's going to really make him work for them. Now let's get to the final check. The movement. I think these guys are equal. They literally do move the same way. Quick, but not so much that you'd notice it. Fast, but not so much that it seems like they're blazing with their footwork. Tremendous footwork from both players. Tremendous footwork. Their footwork is designed to be, aggressive. It's not designed to be, kind of like, you look at the baseline grinders like Nadal and Federer and even Bjorn Borg. Their movement was a lot of little steps, that they just made it seem like everything was coming back. Sampras and Federer were so quick, but their movement was so aggressive that, it just seems like 2 steps and they're there. That's just how fast, because they're just that natural kind of quickness. It ain't a lot of little steps. It's 2 or 3 big ones. But I would have to give a slight advantage to Federer. And that's only because his movement is so much better on the other surfaces. Now, let's break it down shot by shot individually. If we're going serve, we got to give Pete the edge, because the way he's been able to just knock down aces over the years, the way he's been able to, get advantages in the points, the way he's really been able to take over matches with his serve. The forehand and the backhand are both big edges to Federer, because, yes, Pete will hit a good shot every now and then from both wings, but Federer's baseline game just dictates so many of his matches. The ability he has to go from defense to offense from the backcourt is better than anybody I've ever seen. Because here's the thing about it. He'll do something that Pete Sampras won't do. If Federer hits a big shot to his opponent, and they hit one back to his backhand, Fed will take it on the rise and go the other direction. He'll take time away from his opponent from the baseline. You never saw Pete do that. Pete's first and second serve is coming in. Federer will stay back to use his opponent's pace against him and just fire winners. Federer's slice is just ridiculously good because it stays so low you can't hit up on it. You just have to hit up on it. You just can't do it because he's just right there. His forehand has so much action that it's just bending away from you and it's just so quick through the court. Pete's forehand, his running forehand was better than Federer's, but stationary, he's inferior off both wings. Net game, let's give the advantage to Pete. Because I would say that in all honesty, that Pete is probably one of the 2 or 3 greatest volleyers of all time, and Federer's not even in the top 20. Yes, Federer's a phenomenal volleyer, probably one of the best in the game today. But Pete is one of the all-time great volleyers. Now let's go to the return of serve. And this, I think, will have the big impact, whoever returns better. Pete will hit a good return every now and then, because he'll guess right. But Federer has the distinct combination of return of serve qualities that 2 of Pete's biggest rivals did. And that he can be offensive and read the serve like an Andre Agassi did, and just pummel it back at you. Or he can be really long and lanky and, reach for it and just block it back deep or low like Leighton Hewitt. Hewitt gave Sampras fits returning serve. Agassi gave Sampras fits when he was playing well. So you combine those 2 qualities, offense and defense as a returner, and you basically put so much pressure on Pete's serve that, if he doesn't hit his 30 aces in this match, if he, if a lot of balls come back, that'll weigh on Sampras that he's not getting the free points he's usually getting. So huge edge in return to Federer. Pete's return is very good because it'll neutralize you a little bit. He'll chip and come in. But you really can't chip and come in against Federer because his ability to just dictate points is just so extraordinary. Now finally go to the intangibles, careers at Wimbledon, numbers, winning streaks, consistency, opponents. And if that's the case, you have to give a big edge to Federer, and I'll tell you why. For 2 reasons. Number one, Pete Sampras beat up on a bunch of nobodies at Wimbledon. Like, if you look at the Wimbledons he won and the guys that he beat, in this, he was beating guys like no offense to them, but Mark Woodford and Cedric Pioline. Guys like Richard Krajicek beat Sampras at Wimbledon. Guys with just big serves and net games. Ivan Isvich gave Sampras fits. Sampras, to all his glory, he beat on a lot of really, really bad players at Wimbledon. But if you look what Federer's had to go through to win his Wimbledon titles, and you look at what the draw has been loaded with star-studded players. Like, you look at the fact that he's had to beat Andy Roddick 3 times. If Andy Roddick played in the 90s, he would want at least 2 or 3 more majors because of that serve and that forehand. I mean, Nadal's come along and become a great grass court player. I mean, he's had to play Djokovic. He's had to play Murray. The level of talent and the depth of talent in the men's field today is so much greater than it was 20 years ago. 20, 15 years ago, it's just preposterous. I mean, even the 6th and 7th best players in the world are damn good players. Berdych can beat any one of the top 5 when he plays well. He's beaten Djokovic this year, and he's beaten Nadal historically, and he's beaten Federer recently. Ferrer is damn good. So literally the depth of talent and the opponents give Federer a huge edge in intangibles. But I will say that the one intangible Sampras has going for him is the fact that when he did play the better opponents, like the Agassiz, like the Couriers, like the Ivan Iseviches in the finals, and Beckers, he always raised his level of play. Always. He always played well. He always played above his opponents. You look what he did in the 99 final against Agassi. He just demolished Agassi. And Andre turned out to be the number 1 player in the year for that calendar year. So what do I think would happen if those two played each other? In their primes. We have 05, 06, 07 Federer against the Sampras of 94, 95, in that range. Where Pete was 98, 99, where Pete was at the peak of his powers on grass. And Federer was at the peak of his powers on grass in the mid-2000s. The winner, Roger Federer. 5 sets. I see Pete Sampras getting out to a strong start. I see Pete taking the first set, maybe 6 games to 3. I think he gets a break of serve, and I think he takes advantage of a relatively slow start from Federer. But I think Pete wins the next 2 sets, both tight. I think the fact that he's got better return qualities, the fact that he is better from the baseline, I think starts to wear on Pete Sampras in the second and third set, and he takes him 7-5, and then he takes the third one 7-6. In the 4th set, Sampras takes it in a tiebreaker because his serve comes alive and he finally is able to hit through Federer. But I think Federer will ultimately win it in a 5th set. Close 5th set. The one intangible for this match I have not discussed that really will dictate how this match goes. And this is a big one. It's the conditions. If the conditions are like they were in the 2012 final, like Federer when he beat Murray, if they're indoors, I think you give a slighter edge to Pete. You make it closer. Pete would definitely make it a better match because you look at what Pete did indoors in his career. He was almost unbeatable when he played well indoors, as evidenced by his 5 victories in the World Tour in the ATP year-end finals. I mean, Federer's been the best indoor player, no question about it, over the last 10, 11 years. But if the conditions are more like indoors, I think Sampras has a better chance at playing, at beating him. But if the conditions are outdoorsy, if they're like they were, for the 04 Wimbledon final where there's a delay, the 05 one, the 2008 one where there was a delay, if those conditions are like that, then I think you give an edge to Federer because that will slow Sampras' serve down and that'll give Federer time to adjust on his returns. But I say you have everything neutral. The weather neutral, the grass neutral, everything neutral. And those two at their peak, I see Sampras' game as being violent, and I see Federer's as being more complete. Like, Sampras, an incredible volleyer, incredible server, a very good returner, at times from the baseline can be a little lax. Federer has not quite as big a serve as Sampras. It's good, but not quite there. Federer's ground game is just light years ahead of Pete's. And in my opinion, the tiebreaker is this. Whenever you have two strengths going against each other, because Sampras' net game and Federer's ground game, or Sampras' return, or Sampras' serve and Federer's return, you look at how the weaknesses correspond. In this case, I'd say Sampras' return versus Federer's serve, and Sampras' net baseline game versus Federer at the net. Federer gets the check mark in both. I say Roger Federer would dethrone Pete Sampras in 5 sets, just like he did in 2001.